By the time Serena Cho looked at the station clock and went completely still, I already knew I had ruined her night. The last train was gone, the rain was coming down sideways under the platform lights, and the woman who had spent 6 months making me feel like I was one typo away from professional death was standing beside me with dark rain caught in her lashes, breathing like she was trying very hard not to panic in front of me. It started 4 hours earlier, in a conference room on the 9th floor of Lark & Finch Creative, with a client account about to collapse, and a slide deck that looked like it had been assembled by someone having a nervous breakdown. Which, to be fair, it had. Me. I'm Mara Ellis, 29, a junior art director with decent instincts and a bad habit of taking every failure personally, and I had just watched our biggest client's marketing director tell our creative director, in front of half the office, that the campaign felt unfinished and a little confused. Daphne Vale, our creative director, does not raise her voice. She just went very still, the way people do right before they decide who's going to pay for something. "Fix it," she said. "Tonight, I don't care how." Everyone else got to leave. I did not. I fully expected to sit alone with my own panic until 2 in the morning. Except when I looked up an hour later, Serena Cho was still there, blazer off, sleeves pushed up, standing over my shoulder with an expression I couldn't read. "Move over," she said. I didn't ask if you needed help. I'm offering it. There's a difference, Mara. I want you to understand what that meant. In every creative review for 6 months, Serena had been the one voice who never let anything slide. She was 32, a senior brand strategist, so composed there was a rumor she didn't actually sleep. I had spent half a year assuming she thought I was careless, a little too soft for the precision she valued. So when she pulled a chair up next to mine and started rebuilding my broken campaign, line by line, I didn't know what to do with that. She was ruthless with the copy and somehow gentle with me. At one point, her sleeve brushed my wrist, reaching past me, and I felt that brush of contact in a completely inconvenient place in my chest and told myself it meant nothing, because Serena Cho was looking at the deck like it owed her money, not at me. Around midnight, she sat back and exhaled, the first unguarded sound I'd heard from her all night. "That's better. It won't get you fired tomorrow." Then she checked her phone and went still. "I need to catch the 10:40. I looked at the clock. It was 11:41. "There's a later one," she said, already reaching for her coat, her whole body suddenly efficient in a way that told me exactly how much she didn't want to say it. 12:10. "If we go now." We ran, actually. Heels and rain, both of us laughing a little at the sheer absurdity of it. 2 adults sprinting through downtown Boston at midnight because I had needed help with a slide deck, and she had given it to me without being asked twice. Somewhere in the middle of that run, I thought, absurdly, that I liked her better like this. Undone, human. We came around the corner just in time to watch the 12:10 pull away from the platform. Serena stopped running. I stopped a few steps after her, watching her stand very still under the flickering platform light, staring at the empty track like it had personally betrayed her. I had never seen her like that before. Not once. Not in the worst client call I'd ever witnessed. For just a second, she looked like a woman whose whole plan for the night had collapsed, and who had no idea what came next. "I'm fine," she said automatically, patting her coat pockets and pulling out a phone with 4% battery. "I'll call a car." "In this?" "Downtown, during a storm, at midnight? Then I'll find a hotel. With a dead phone and no charger, alone." I said it as gently as I could, and something in her face flickered. Not anger, something closer to being caught. Rain hammered the platform roof above us. A vending machine hummed somewhere behind us, its light the only warm color in the whole gray station. I watched Serena Cho, of all people, look genuinely lost, and something in me that had spent 6 months being intimidated by her simply softened. "I live 12 minutes from here," I said. "I have a couch." "It's not glamorous, but it's dry." She looked at me a long moment, rain sliding down her jaw, and I watched every carefully built wall in her expression hesitate. "Mara," she said, quiet, like the word cost her something. "Can I stay with you?" "Yeah," I said. "Of course you can." Before we return to the story, a quick note for my lovely viewers. While this YouTube series keeps things safe, my Patreon is where the real fun happens. That's where you'll find completely uncensored GL stories, much hotter exclusive videos, and bolder adventures that are just too spicy for YouTube. If you want the full, no-limits experience and to support more of this kind of storytelling, the Patreon link is in the description below. We stopped at a 24-hour convenience store 2 blocks from my building, mostly because Serena's shoes had filled with water and she was starting to shiver in a way she was trying very hard to hide. The fluorescent lights in that place were the ugly kind, the kind that make everyone look faintly ill, and Serena stood in the socks aisle looking at a rack of cartoon-printed ankle socks like they had personally offended her dignity. "These are the only ones in my size," she said. "They have cats on them." "I'm aware. You're going to wear cat socks home." "I'm going to wear cat socks to your apartment, Mara, which is not my home, and I would appreciate it if you stopped narrating my humiliation out loud." I laughed, and for the first time all night, she almost laughed too. A small huff of air through her nose, quickly smothered, but real. We got the socks. We got a cheap phone charger because hers had died somewhere between the platform and the store. The cashier ringing us up under lights so harsh they made the whole transaction feel like something out of a fever dream. We got instant noodles because when I asked her if she'd eaten dinner, she went quiet in a way that answered the question better than words would have, and I refused to accept that as an option. "I don't need you managing my nutrition, Mara." "I'm not managing it. I'm buying you noodles because it is 1 in the morning and you have had a granola bar and adrenaline since 3 o'clock this afternoon, and I would like you to survive the night." I dropped a second cup into the basket for good measure. Humor me. She studied me for a second in that assessing way she had, like she was recalculating something, and then, quietly, took the basket out of my hands and carried it to the register herself. "You skipped dinner to fix my campaign," I said, dropping 2 cups of noodles onto the counter. "I had a granola bar around 3. That doesn't count. It counts as sustenance. It counts as you forgetting you're a person with a body that needs things, which incidentally is a pattern I'm noticing." She looked at me sideways, rain still dripping off the ends of her hair, cat socks tucked under one arm, and something about the look was almost soft. "You've known me for 6 months. You don't get to diagnose my patterns yet. Give me till morning." I don't know why I said it like that. Flirtatious, easy, like I hadn't spent half a year assuming she found me exhausting. But she didn't correct me. She just paid for the noodles before I could, which started an entire quiet argument at the register that she won by simply handing her card over first, and then we walked the rest of the way to my building, with the rain finally starting to ease into something softer, more like mist than assault. My apartment is on the 3rd floor above a bakery that starts its ovens at 4 in the morning, which means on good nights the whole stairwell smells like proofing bread, faint and warm, underneath the damp smell of an old building. I unlocked the door already apologizing for the state of it. Sketchbooks on the coffee table, a coffee mug from 3 days ago, plants crowding the windowsill because I apparently cannot stop buying them, and Serena stepped inside and just stood there for a second, dripping quietly onto my hallway mat, looking around like she wasn't sure what to do with a space this unpolished. "It's small," I said. "It's warm," she said, and there was something in the way she said it. Like warm was not a word she got to use about places very often. That made my chest ache a little. I got her a towel. I got her dry clothes, because there was no version of this night where I let her sit in a soaked blouse until morning. An old college sweatshirt, soft from 100 washes, and a pair of flannel sleep pants that were going to be too short on her but better than nothing. When she came out of my bathroom wearing them, hair damp and pulled back, cat socks on her feet, no blazer, no armor, just a tired woman in borrowed clothes standing barefoot in my kitchen doorway, I nearly dropped the mug I was holding. "What?" she said, catching my expression. "Nothing. You just look." I stopped myself. "I look what?" "Different. Good different. I don't mean that as an insult to the blazer." She huffed that same small laugh again, ducking her head, and for a second, the intimidating woman from every design review I'd ever sat through was simply gone, replaced by someone who looked young and a little embarrassed and entirely unsure of how to occupy a stranger's kitchen at 1 in the morning. We ate noodles standing at my counter, because I don't actually own a kitchen table, just a narrow strip of counter and 2 stools that don't match. I told her about the sketchbooks when she noticed them on the coffee table later. Actual sketches, character studies, and layout ideas I never showed anyone at work because they felt too unfinished, too personal. She picked one up without asking, which from anyone else would have annoyed me, and studied it with the same focus she gave client decks. "You're better than the work you've been putting in front of the client," she said finally. "That's not true." "It is. You've been giving them safe ideas because you're scared of getting torn apart in review. This," she tapped the sketchbook, "this is what you actually think. It's better. You tear me apart in review." "I push you," she said, and there was an edge of something almost defensive in it. "Because I've read your actual work, Mara. The stuff you don't show anyone. I sat in on the portfolio review when they hired you, before you knew who I was. I've been watching you underperform your own talent for 6 months because you're terrified of being wrong in front of me specifically, and I didn't know how to tell you that without it sounding." She stopped herself. "Without it sounding like what?" I asked, very quietly. "Like I'd been paying attention to you in a way that wasn't strictly professional," she said, and then looked immediately like she regretted it. The apartment got very quiet. Rain against the window had softened to almost nothing. Somewhere below us, faintly, I thought I could smell the first hint of the bakery's ovens starting up early, hours before dawn, warm and yeasty under everything else. Serena. "Don't," she said, not unkindly. "Not tonight. I'm tired, and I'm in your borrowed pants, and I don't trust anything I say right now to be something I'd stand behind in the morning." I respected that more than I could say. So instead of pushing, I made tea, and in the process of pouring it, I knocked my own mug off the counter, and it shattered across the kitchen floor in a spray of ceramic and lukewarm liquid. And Serena was down on her knees, helping me collect the pieces before I'd even finished swearing. "Careful," she said, catching my wrist before I reached for a shard with my bare fingers. Her hand was warm, warmer than I expected. "You'll cut yourself." "You first, then, Miss Efficient. I have steadier hands." "Is that a professional opinion or a personal one?" She looked up at me from the floor, kneeling in my kitchen in borrowed flannel pants and cat socks, holding a piece of my broken mug, and something passed between us that had nothing to do with ceramic shards. "Both," she said. We finished cleaning in near silence after that, a comfortable kind, the kind that doesn't need filling. I gave her the couch because she insisted, folding her wet coat with a precision that made me want to laugh. Corners matched, sleeves tucked, like she was preparing it for inspection, and refusing the extra blanket I offered twice, before finally, quietly, accepting it the 3rd time. The storm outside picked back up around 2, thunder rolling low over the harbor, and the power flickered once, twice, throwing the whole apartment into a half-second of total dark before it came back. I found her sitting up on the couch afterward, blanket around her shoulders, looking more unsettled by the dark than she probably wanted me to see. "Storms," she said, before I could ask. "Not my favorite." I sat down next to her, not too close, close enough. The couch is narrow, and there wasn't really a version of sitting on it that didn't put our shoulders near each other. And for a long moment, we just sat there under one blanket, listening to rain against the window, saying nothing. "Thank you," she said eventually, "for tonight, the deck, and this. You stayed for me first." "I know." She turned her head, and we were suddenly closer than I'd realized, close enough that I could see the tired shadows under her eyes, the place where her composure had worn thin enough to show something younger underneath it. For a second, I thought she was going to close the distance. I thought I might close it myself. Her eyes dropped, just briefly, to my mouth, and my whole chest went tight and warm and terrified all at once. Then she looked away, and the moment passed, gently, like she'd made a decision. "Good night, Mara," she said. "Good night, Serena." I did not sleep well. I don't think she did either. But in the morning, there was a woman in my kitchen wearing my old sweatshirt, hair down for the first time since I'd known her, making 2 cups of tea like she'd lived there for years, and the bakery smell was drifting up through the floorboards. warm and golden, and I stood in my own doorway for a second, just watching her, before she noticed me. "Don't stare," she said, without turning around. "It's rude." "You can't possibly know I'm staring." "I can feel it. It's a very specific quality of silence." She turned, holding out one of the mugs. "Milk, no sugar. I noticed last night." I took the mug. Our fingers brushed. Neither of us mentioned it. We almost got caught right there in my hallway 20 minutes later, when I heard Talia's voice on the stairwell. She has a spare key for emergencies and apparently decided a Wednesday morning bagel run counted. And I nearly shoved Serena into the bathroom in a panic that made her raise both eyebrows at me in silent, amused judgment. Talia didn't come up after all. Some change of plans shouted down to a neighbor, and we stood there afterward, Serena still in my sweatshirt, both of us laughing quietly at how ridiculous the whole scramble had been. "We have to go to work in an hour," she said. "Together, apparently, since my clothes are still wet. I have a blazer that might fit you. It'll be tight. It'll be humiliating. It'll be memorable." She actually smiled at that. A real one, unguarded, the kind I hadn't seen from her in 6 months of meetings. "Careful, Mara. You're going to make me like you." "Too late," I said, before I could stop myself, and watched something flicker, warm and startled behind her eyes. We walked into the office separately, 10 minutes apart, like conspirators, and I told myself the whole day that nothing had actually changed. I told myself that a long time, actually. I was wrong almost immediately. By 10 a.m., Serena was fully rebuilt into her usual self. Blazer borrowed but pressed somehow into looking intentional, voice even, expression composed, correcting a media buyer's numbers in the morning stand-up with the same clipped precision she used on everyone. I watched her do it and felt something strange and disproportionate twist in my chest, because 12 hours earlier, this same woman had been kneeling on my kitchen floor in cat socks holding a piece of broken mug like it mattered to her that I didn't get hurt. She didn't look at me once during the meeting. Not once. I told myself that was smart, professional. Exactly what two adults who worked together should do after an accidental sleepover neither of them had planned. I told myself that, and I still felt it like a small door quietly closing. But then I noticed, over the following days, all the ways the door wasn't actually closed, just hidden. Serena started using my mug when she borrowed the break room, the chipped blue one with the bird on it, when there were 6 other mugs available. She corrected Claire Benton mid-meeting, when Claire dismissed one of my concepts as cute, but maybe not strategic, saying, with total flatness, "It's the strongest idea in the deck." If you missed that, I'd reread it. In the elevator once, standing shoulder to shoulder with 3 other people between us and the doors, her sleeve brushed mine, and she didn't pull away, and neither did I, and we rode 4 floors in silence, not looking at each other, and both very aware of exactly where our arms were touching. And one Thursday, I came back from lunch to find a paper bag on my desk, still warm, a cinnamon roll from the bakery under my apartment, no note, no explanation, gone before I could even ask who'd left it, except I knew. I knew, because that bakery doesn't deliver, and someone would have had to go 3 blocks out of their way before work to get it, and there was only one person who knew exactly which bakery that was. I ate half of it standing at my desk with my hand pressed flat against my mouth, trying not to smile like an idiot in the middle of the office. There was a design review that Friday. The whole creative team crowded into the glass-walled conference room with Daphne at the head of the table, and I felt Serena's attention on my boards the entire time, even though she never once looked directly at me. When a junior strategist tried to push a competing concept, flashier, safer, the kind of thing that tests well and says nothing, Serena dismantled it in 4 sentences, without raising her voice, the same clinical precision she'd used on me for 6 months. Except now I could hear something underneath it I hadn't been able to hear before. She wasn't cold, she was careful. There is a difference, and once you can hear it, you can't stop hearing it. "Mara's concept has a point of view," she said, tapping the board without looking at me. "The other one has a mood board. Those aren't the same thing." Daphne agreed. The room moved on. Under the table, out of anyone's line of sight, Serena's foot found mine, and stayed there for exactly as long as the meeting lasted, and I spent the next 40 minutes trying to take competent notes while feeling that single point of contact everywhere at once. Claire Benton noticed things. Claire noticed everything, actually, in that particular way. Account managers sometimes do, cataloging office dynamics like currency. She started making comments, light ones at first, the kind designed to sound like jokes. Serena's been extra invested in your work lately, Mara. Wonder what earned that. Then, a week later, sharper. Must be nice, having Serena Cho personally rewriting your decks. The rest of us have to actually be good at our jobs. I laughed it off both times. I was better at hiding how much it landed than I expected to be. The real conversation, the one that actually mattered, happened almost 2 weeks after the missed train, in the emergency stairwell on the 7th floor, after a review meeting where Serena had been so coldly professional toward me that I'd felt something crack open in my chest and had to leave the room before anyone saw my face do something inconvenient. She followed me. I hadn't expected that. Mara, don't, I said, echoing her own word back at her from that first night. Except I meant it differently. Don't follow me out here to be reasonable at me. I don't want reasonable right now. What do you want? I want to know why you can sit in my kitchen at 1 a.m, telling me I'm talented, and touch my wrist like it means something, and then treat me like a stranger in a meeting 12 days later. My voice cracked a little on the word stranger, and I hated that it did. Serena was quiet for a long moment, arms crossed, back against the stairwell wall, looking more unsettled than I had ever seen her look at work. Because I know what happens to women in this industry when people think they're being favored, she said finally. I've watched it happen. Someone works twice as hard as everyone else and still gets reduced to whoever they're sleeping with, the second there's a rumor. I didn't want that to happen to you. Not because of me. So your solution was to make me feel like the night at my apartment didn't happen? My solution was to protect you from something I understand better than you do, she said, and there was real heat in it now, the first crack in her usual control. You don't know what it's like to have people whisper that your work isn't actually yours. I built my entire reputation, making sure no one could ever say that about me. I didn't want it said about you. I didn't ask you to protect me like that, Serena. I asked you to be honest with me. Those aren't the same thing. I stepped closer, my voice quieter now, steadier. Being protected without being asked still feels like being pushed away. Do you understand that? It feels exactly the same from where I'm standing. Something in her face broke open, just slightly. She lifted one hand like she was going to touch my face. I saw it happen, saw the intention there, clear as anything, and then she stopped herself an inch away, fingers curling back into her palm like she'd caught herself doing something dangerous. I noticed the restraint. I noticed it more than I would have noticed the touch itself, because the restraint told me everything the touch would have confirmed. She wanted this. She wanted it and was choosing, deliberately, not to have it, and I didn't yet understand why that felt so much worse than if she hadn't wanted it at all. I have to get back, she said, and left before I could answer. The weekend campaign shoot happened 9 days later, at a beautiful decommissioned theater on the waterfront that the agency had booked for a client's new spring line. Velvet seats gone soft with age, a stage lit gold even in disrepair, storm clouds visible through the high windows all afternoon. The client changed the entire creative direction 2 hours before we were supposed to wrap, panicking about a competitor's launch, and by the time the crew packed up and left in defeat, it was just Serena and me, alone in that enormous echoing space, trying to rebuild an entire visual concept before Monday. The crew had left in a hurry, equipment cases still half-packed in the aisles, and the theater felt enormous and strange without anyone else in it, just the two of us, a scattering of storyboards, and the sound of rain finding every gap in the old roof. We fought. Really fought, for the first time, not the clipped professional disagreements of a design review, but something rawer, both of us exhausted and frightened and circling the actual subject without naming it. You keep hiding behind control, I said, standing in the middle of that empty stage, papers scattered around us like debris. Every time something gets real, you retreat into being the person who has all the answers. And you keep pretending vulnerability is the same thing as weakness, when it's the opposite, Mara. It's the bravest thing you do, and you won't let anyone see it happen, except by accident. That's not fair. Neither is watching you flinch every time I get close to you like you're bracing for me to disappear. I turned to walk away. I don't even know where I thought I was going. There was nowhere to go. We were locked in an old theater together, with a storm outside and an unfinished campaign between us. But I started walking anyway, because staying felt like standing too close to something I couldn't survive being wrong about. Mara. The way she said my name stopped me completely. Not sharp, not controlled. Something underneath all of that, finally showing itself. I turned around. She had crossed half the stage without my noticing, and now there were only a few feet between us, rain drumming against the theater's high windows, the gold stage lights catching the exhaustion and fear in her face. I have wanted to kiss you since the night you gave me the last clean towel in your apartment like it was nothing, she said. Like I mattered enough for you to think of it. I have wanted to kiss you in every meeting since. Every time you use that mug I noticed. Every time you laugh at something and don't realize I'm watching. I am telling you this because I am tired of being careful about it, and I don't know how to keep doing that anymore. Don't say things like that unless you mean them, I said, my voice unsteady. I mean them. I don't remember which of us closed the last of the distance. I remember her hand finding my jaw, trembling slightly. The first time I had ever felt Serena Cho's hands anything but perfectly steady. And I remember gripping the front of her coat like I needed something to hold on to. And then her mouth was on mine, slow at first, careful, like she was still asking permission even after everything she'd just said. I kissed her back and felt something in my chest that had been braced for 6 months finally let go. It went on a long time. Rain against the windows, her breath catching against my mouth, my hands finding their way into her hair, hers sliding to my waist like she'd been waiting to know if she was allowed. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing hard, foreheads together, and she let out a shaky laugh I had never heard from her before. That was overdue, she said. By about 2 weeks and a broken mug's worth of denial. I'm counting the towel as the actual beginning, she murmured, and kissed me again, softer this time, unhurried, like we finally had somewhere we were allowed to be. We didn't finish the campaign concept that night. We finished it Sunday, in my apartment, her laptop balanced on my knees and mine on hers, trading ideas back and forth while the bakery downstairs went through its Sunday baking rhythm and rain kept the windows soft and gray. It felt, for those few days, like something simple and unguarded and entirely ours. The days after that were the kind I want to remember slowly, on purpose, the way you'd reread a favorite page. Serena walked me home from work twice that week, even though it took her 20 minutes out of her way to the station, both of us moving slow through early evening light, neither of us in any hurry to end the walk. One night, exhausted after a client call that ran until 9, I fell asleep against her shoulder in the back of a cab before we'd even crossed the bridge, and she told me later she'd sat completely still the whole ride so she wouldn't wake me, one hand resting light against my hair, watching the city go by like she'd never seen it from that angle before. She tried to cook in my kitchen the following Sunday and was, it turned out, spectacularly bad at it. Burned garlic, oversalted sauce, a small onion-related injury that required the good bandages, and stood there afterward looking so genuinely offended by her own incompetence that I laughed until I had to sit down on the kitchen floor. I run strategy for accounts worth 8 figures, she said, staring at the ruined pan, like it had personally betrayed her the way the empty train track once had. I cannot understand how I've failed at pasta. You overmanage the garlic. You have to let it be a little wrong. I don't know how to let things be a little wrong, Mara. That's sort of my whole personality. I've noticed, I said, taking the wooden spoon out of her hand before she could interrogate the sauce any further. It's very cute and also completely maddening. She stayed the night more than she went home some weeks, and I learned the particular, precise way she folded a blanket when she thought no one was watching. Corners matched, edges squared, like she was still preparing for an inspection that was never going to come. And I teased her about it mercilessly until she started doing it on purpose, exaggerated, just to make me laugh. You fold laundry like it's a hotel inspection, I told her one night, watching her square off a throw blanket with unnecessary precision. Some of us were raised to leave things better than we found them. Some of us were raised by a woman who thinks a fitted sheet is a personal enemy, so this is very intimidating to witness. She sent a spare keycard to my hotel room during a work trip to New York 2 weeks later. No note, just slid under the door while I was in the shower, and I found it lying on the carpet and had to sit on the edge of the bed for a full minute just holding it, absurdly moved by something so small. There was a kiss in the elevator on the way down to the lobby the next morning. Unhurried, her hand at the back of my neck, both of us pulling apart half a second before the doors opened on the second floor, breathless and grinning like teenagers who'd nearly been caught. And there was a Tuesday morning, weeks into all of it, when I woke to find her asleep on my couch again. Not stranded this time, not fleeing a storm, just there, having stayed late and fallen asleep mid-conversation, one hand still loosely holding the book she'd been reading to me from before her eyes gave out. I stood in the doorway a long moment just looking at her, hair loose across the cushion, face soft and unguarded, the way it only ever got in sleep, and felt something settle in my chest that had nothing to do with panic or secrecy or waiting for the other shoe to drop. When she woke and found me watching, she didn't apologize for falling asleep there the way she once might have. She just reached a hand toward me, silent, and pulled me down into the small space beside her, and neither of us pretended anymore that any of it was an accident. Monday morning, we walked into the office 10 minutes apart again, like conspirators, exactly the way we had after the first night. Except this time, neither of us could quite stop smiling, and Talia caught me grinning at my monitor for no visible reason, and demanded, in a whisper sharp enough to draw looks, to know exactly what had happened over the weekend. I told her nothing. She didn't believe me for a second. "You have the face," she said. "The specific face. I've seen you have a lot of faces in 2 years of friendship, and I have never once seen this one." "I don't know what you're talking about." Mara Ellis. "Did something happen with Serena Cho?" "Eat your bagel, Talia." She did not, in fact, eat her bagel. She spent the rest of the morning finding excuses to walk past my desk, and by lunch, she'd cornered me in the stairwell. Our stairwell, apparently everyone's stairwell now, and refused to let me leave until I'd admitted, in the barest possible terms, that yes, something had happened, and yes, it was good, and no, I was not ready to talk about it in more detail than that. She hugged me so hard I nearly dropped my coffee. It did not stay simple. There was a night, before any of that started, when we ended up on the roof of the building after a late strategy session, standing at the railing with the whole city spread out gold and wet beneath us, and Serena told me things about herself she said she'd never told anyone at Lark and Finch. "My father left when I was 16, she said, not looking at me, watching the harbor instead. Just gone. No warning, not much explanation. My mother worked 2 jobs after that, and I was the oldest, so I became the one who made sure Nina had lunch money, and the bills got paid, and nobody at school ever found out how close we came to losing the house some months. I got very good at looking like everything was fine. I think I've just never stopped. That's a lot for a 16-year-old to carry. It's a lot for anyone. I didn't know how to put it down once I started. Even now, the commute, I could move closer to the city. I make enough. But I still send money home every month, and I still take the last train because it's cheaper than the earlier one, and some part of me has never quite believed I'm allowed to spend the difference on myself. She finally looked at me, something raw in her expression that the office never got to see. "The night I missed the train, Mara, I want you to understand that wasn't really about the train. It was the first time in probably 15 years that I chose someone else's crisis over my own schedule and didn't immediately regret it. I'm glad you missed it," I said quietly. "So am I." That terrifies me a little, if I'm honest. She reached over and laced her fingers through mine on the railing, an easy, unguarded gesture that still felt new enough to catch in my chest every time. I'm not used to letting anyone see the parts of me that are still that scared kid making sure the lights stay on. You don't have to be the one holding everything up all the time. Not with me. I'm learning that. Slowly, you'll have to be patient with me. "I can do patient," I said, and meant it. And we stood there a long time after that, not talking, just watching the city, her fingers still laced through mine. Claire Benton noticed the shift almost immediately, something in how we stood near each other now. something in the ease that hadn't been there before, and by the following Wednesday there was a rumor moving through the office with the particular speed that only office rumors have. Mara Ellis's concept got chosen because she's sleeping with Serena Cho. I heard it secondhand from Talia, who delivered it with the kind of furious protectiveness that told me she'd already shut down at least one version of the conversation before it reached me. I told her it was disgusting to say out loud, Talia said, sitting on the edge of my desk after hours, arms crossed. But it's already out there, Mara. People are saying it. It's not true. The concept was mine before Serena ever looked at it. I know that. You know that. Doesn't matter once it's a story people like better than the truth. It got worse before it got better. A junior copywriter I barely knew asked me, with the particular fake casualness of someone fishing for gossip, whether it was hard working under someone you're involved with, like it was already established fact, like there was nothing left to confirm. I said the work spoke for itself and walked away before my face could do anything I'd regret. Someone left an anonymous comment on an internal feedback form, questioning whether the Sorrentino concept had gone through proper review, which Daphne dismissed within an hour, but which still sat in my inbox like a small, cold stone for the rest of the week. Daphne called me into her office 2 days later, and I could tell by the careful way she closed the door that this was not going to be a conversation about my work. "I'm not going to ask you what's true," Daphne said, settling behind her desk, "because frankly, it isn't my business unless it affects this agency's ability to win the Sorrentino pitch next month. But I need you to understand something. We cannot afford internal scandal 3 weeks out from the biggest account this agency has touched in 5 years. I need your head clear and your reputation clean, whatever is or isn't happening in your personal life." "Nothing about my work has changed," I said, my voice tighter than I meant it to be. "I know that, Mara. You're talented. That was never the question." Her expression softened just slightly. "But talent doesn't protect you from what people choose to believe. I've watched it happen to better people than either of you, and I've watched it end careers that didn't deserve to end. Be careful, that's all I'm asking." "Understood," I said, though what I actually felt was something closer to grief. For a version of this that could have just been simple, uncomplicated, allowed to exist in daylight without anyone calculating the professional cost of it. I left that office feeling hollowed out in a way I hadn't expected, humiliated in a way that had nothing to do with anything I'd actually done. And that night, when Serena and I finally saw each other alone, in the stairwell again, because apparently that stairwell had become ours, I watched her retreat somewhere I couldn't follow. "I think we should be more careful," she said, not quite meeting my eyes. "At work, distance, for a while." "Serena, that's exactly what you did before. That's the thing I told you doesn't work. It's different now. There's a pitch. There's your reputation. I won't be the reason people stop taking you seriously." Her voice was even, controlled, every wall rebuilt in the span of a single conversation with Daphne that I hadn't even been in the room for. "You're doing it again," I said quietly. "You're protecting me right out of the room." I don't know how else to love someone without trying to shield them from every consequence I can see coming, Mara. I've never known how to do that differently. My whole life I've been the one who fixes things before they become disasters. I don't know how to just stand there and let a disaster happen to someone I care about. "Then I don't want a love that only exists where no one can see it," I said, and my voice broke on the last word, and I hated that it did. Standing there in a stairwell that smelled like industrial cleaner and old paint, watching the person I had fallen for choose fear over me for the second time. She didn't say anything. I left first. The separation that followed was quiet, which somehow made it worse than if it had been loud. Serena stopped taking the late train. I noticed, because I noticed everything about her now, the way she left promptly at 6, the way she started booking car services instead of risking another night stranded near me. The office got colder without her waiting by the printer, without the strange rhythm we'd built of small glances and shared mugs, and her sleeve against mine in elevators. My apartment felt too quiet, too. The sweatshirt she'd worn that first night was still folded on the back of a chair, and I couldn't bring myself to move it, and every time I walked past it, I felt something in my chest pull tight. The bakery downstairs smelled the same as always. Warm, familiar, 4 in the morning ovens starting up like nothing had changed. But the whole apartment felt different without her in it, and I hated how quickly I'd let one person rearrange the meaning of my own home. I know now, because she told me much later, that Serena spent those 2 weeks starting texts to me and deleting them before she sent a single one. I know she sat in her own quiet suburban house some nights staring at her phone, composing entire apologies in her head that she never let herself send, because some part of her still believed that walking away from me was the more responsible kind of love. Serena told me, much later, that she spent one of those nights sitting in her car outside my building for almost 20 minutes, engine off, hands on the wheel, working up the nerve to come upstairs and say she'd been wrong. She said she watched the light in my kitchen window go on and off, watched a shadow move behind the curtain that she was almost certain was me making tea alone, and then drove home anyway, because some old, stubborn part of her still believed that leaving me alone was the safer kind of love. She told me this with her face turned slightly away, like she still wasn't entirely sure she deserved to be forgiven for it, and I held her hand until she looked back at me. Talia found me crying in the supply closet on the Tuesday of the second week, which is a humiliating sentence to say out loud, but an accurate one, and she didn't say anything smug or told you so, just sat down on an overturned box of printer paper next to me and handed me a tissue from her cardigan pocket, like she'd been carrying it around specifically for this purpose. "You could just tell her you miss her," Talia said eventually. "She knows I miss her. That's not the problem. The problem is, she thinks disappearing is the same thing as loving me correctly. That does sound like a Serena Cho problem, honestly." Talia bumped her shoulder against mine. "For what it's worth, I've never seen you like this over anyone. Even before the missing train thing. You used to talk about her like she was a weather system you had to plan around. Now you talk about her like she's, I don't know, home." "She kind of is," I admitted, and that was the first time I said it out loud to anyone, sitting on the floor of a supply closet surrounded by printer paper, and it made the whole thing feel more real and more painful at the same time. Then maybe don't give up on that just because she's scared. Scared people need someone to be patient with them sometimes. Doesn't mean you have to do all the waiting alone forever, but give her a minute before you write the whole thing off. I didn't know, sitting there, that the minute was going to end at the Sorrentino pitch. I just knew I wasn't ready to write it off yet either. The Sorrentino pitch arrived on a Thursday, 3 weeks after the theater kiss, and it was, by every account, the most important presentation Lark and Finch Creative had put together in years. I was presenting the visual concept, my concept, built from sketches that had started in a notebook I never used to show anyone, and Claire made sure, in the pre-meeting small talk, to mention loudly enough for the client to hear that she'd heard the creative direction had been heavily shaped by senior strategy input. I felt the room's attention shift toward me like weather changing. I looked instinctively for Serena. She was seated near the back, composed as always, and for one terrible second I thought she was going to do exactly what she'd always done. Step in, take the weight off me, smooth it over with her authority before I even had to try. She didn't. She caught my eye, held it for a fraction of a second, and gave me the smallest nod I have ever received in my life. It said, clearly, without a single word, "This is yours. Take it." So I did. I stood up in front of that entire client team, and I walked them through every decision in that campaign. Why the color story mattered, why the copy took the risk it took, why the whole concept lived or died on trusting the audience to feel something instead of being told what to feel. My hands were shaking when I started. By the third slide, they weren't. I answered every hard question Claire's insinuation had planted in the room, calmly, specifically, citing the sketchbook pages the ideas had actually come from, the late nights I'd spent building the concept, long before Serena had ever looked at a single layout. I watched the client's expression shift from skepticism to genuine interest to, by the end, something close to excitement. When I finished, there was a beat of silence, and then the client's lead marketing director, the same woman who'd called my earlier work unfinished and confused, said, "This is exactly what we needed. This is the work." I did not look at Serena during the applause. I was too busy trying not to cry in front of a client. Daphne caught my arm on the way out of the room, unusually warm for her, and said only, That's the work I hired you for," which from Daphne was practically a standing ovation. But it was afterward, walking out of that conference room on legs that still felt unsteady, that I saw Serena standing near the elevator bank, watching me with an expression I had genuinely never seen on her before. Not composed, not careful, just openly, undisguisedly proud, like something in her chest had cracked wide open watching me do that. She didn't say anything to me at the office. We both knew better than that, still, even after everything. But that evening, walking to the train station out of old habit, even though I knew she'd been avoiding it, I found her standing on the same platform where we'd missed the last train weeks earlier. The same flickering light overhead. The same ugly vending machine humming somewhere behind her, except this time she wasn't panicking. She was just standing there, hands in her coat pockets, waiting. The platform was nearly empty, just the two of us and the cold wind funneling down the tracks and a paper cup of station coffee going lukewarm in her hands, untouched. She looked smaller than I was used to seeing her look, coat collar turned up against the wind, and for a second I just stood there at the top of the stairs, taking her in before I made myself move. "You're not stranded this time," I said, coming to a stop a few feet away. "No," she agreed. "I wanted to be here anyway. This is where I first let myself need something. I thought I should stand here and actually think about what that meant, instead of running from it." "And what did you decide?" She turned to face me fully, and for the first time in weeks, I saw her without any of the careful distance she'd been holding between us. "I decided I've spent my whole life confusing protection with control. I decided that hiding you was never actually about protecting you. It was about protecting myself from what it would mean if I lost you after finally letting myself want someone. I'm sorry, Mara, for the stairwell, and the distance, and every time I chose fear instead of you. I was scared too," I admitted. "I want you to know that I wasn't just angry at you. I was scared of exactly the same thing, of being wanted and then hidden. My last relationship ended because someone made me feel like needing things made me too much. I built my whole life around never asking for reassurance again. And then you asked me that question on this exact platform, and it undid something in me I didn't know was still tangled up." "What do you want?" Serena asked, quiet, steady, like the question mattered more than anything else she could say. "Tell me plainly. I won't guess wrong again." "I want honesty," I said. "I want warmth. I don't have to interpret through a stairwell conversation 3 weeks later. I want respect. In public, not just in my kitchen at 2 in the morning. And I want you to stay because you choose to, Serena. Not because you missed a train. Not because you're protecting me from something. Because you want to." She closed the distance between us slowly, giving me every chance to step back, which I didn't. When she kissed me this time, it was different from the theater. Steadier, surer. The kind of kiss that comes after a person has finally stopped running from the thing they want. The platform lights flickered overhead. Somewhere down the tracks, another train's headlights swept toward the station, and neither of us moved to catch it. "I choose you," she said against my mouth. I should have said that 3 weeks ago, instead of retreating into the stairwell. "You're saying it now." "I'm saying it now," she agreed, and kissed me again. And this time it felt less like an ending to something, and more like the actual beginning we'd both been too frightened to claim the first time around. We didn't make some big announcement at the office. That was never really who either of us was. But we stopped acting ashamed, which turned out to matter more than any formal declaration could have. In the next creative review, Serena openly credited my concept in front of the whole team. No hedging, no careful distance. Mara's instincts on this campaign were sharper than mine. I want that on record. When Claire made one last attempt at a pointed comment in the break room, something about special treatment, watching me over the rim of her coffee cup like she expected me to shrink the way I used to, I looked at her and said, calmly, without heat, "My work doesn't become less real because someone loves me. If anything, I think it's gotten better since I stopped being scared of being seen. You're welcome to keep bringing it up if it makes you feel better, but I'd think about what it says that this is still the thing you're focused on a month after the Sorrentino win." Claire's mouth opened and then closed again. "I was just making conversation." "No, you weren't. But it's fine. We can stop having this conversation now." I said it lightly enough that it didn't feel like a scene, just a door closing, quiet and final, and I walked back to my desk, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. Claire didn't have much to say after that. Daphne pulled me aside once more, weeks later, not to warn me this time, but almost, in her own careful way, to acknowledge something. You earned your place here, Mara. I want you to know I never doubted that, even when I was worried about optics. Keep your work clean going forward. Not because I disapprove of anything else, but because I respect both of you too much to want to see either of your reputations damaged by something that isn't anyone's business but yours. It was, from Daphne, practically a blessing. The months that followed were not dramatic. They were better than dramatic. They were steady. Serena took me to her mother's house for the first time on a Sunday in early autumn, out past the last commuter stop on a quiet street lined with maples just starting to turn, and I watched her get visibly more nervous the closer we got, smoothing her coat twice, checking her reflection in the car window, going quiet in a way that had nothing to do with her usual composure and everything to do with genuine fear. You don't have to be nervous, I said, taking her hand as we walked up the front path. I've never brought anyone here, not since college. My mother has opinions about everyone I've ever dated, and she does not keep them to herself. I can handle opinions. You say that now. The house was smaller than I expected, tidy and a little worn at the edges in the way of a home that had been carefully maintained on not quite enough money for a very long time. A hand-repaired porch railing, a garden that clearly got more love than the budget for it, family photos crowding every surface, Serena, at every age from gap-toothed 7-year-old to a serious, composed teenager who already looked like she was carrying more than her share. I met Nina, Serena's younger sister, at a family dinner that Serena was clearly more nervous about than any client pitch she'd ever run, watching me across her mother's table like she expected the whole evening to combust. Nina turned out to be warm and funny, in a way that made the family resemblance obvious, in a completely different key than Serena's controlled elegance. She's been different since you, Nina told me quietly in the kitchen, while Serena argued good-naturedly with their mother about whether the rice needed more salt. Softer. She used to come home exhausted every single night and never let any of us see it. Now she actually complains about her day like a normal person. It's honestly a relief. She works very hard at seeming like she doesn't need anything, I said. She's been doing that since our dad left, and she decided she had to be the one who held everything together. I think some part of her never stopped being 17, and terrified that if she showed weakness, everything would fall apart. Nina glanced toward the dining room, where Serena was laughing at something her mother said, unguarded in a way I still wasn't fully used to seeing outside my own apartment. I've never seen her laugh like that at this table. Thank you for that. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just watched Serena through the doorway a moment longer, feeling something settle warm and certain in my chest. Serena's mother cornered me by the dessert table later, a small, sharp-eyed woman who studied me for a long moment before she spoke, the same evaluating stillness I recognized instantly from her daughter. She told me about the train, she said without preamble, the night she missed it because of you. Serena has never once in her life missed anything by accident. She plans for weather. She plans for traffic. She has spare chargers in 3 different bags. A small, knowing smile. So I don't think that was an accident, whatever she told you at the time. I've wondered about that myself, I admitted. Take care of her, she said, patting my hand once, brisk and final. The conversation apparently concluded. She has spent her whole life taking care of everyone else. It would be nice to see someone return the favor. I promised her I would try. I meant it more than I think she expected me to. We stayed for pie and for Nina's terrible card tricks and for a full hour of stories about a teenage Serena that made present-day Serena visibly want to disappear into the upholstery, and by the time we caught the train back into the city, late, the 2 of us sharing 1 set of earbuds and half a bag of Nina's leftover cookies, I understood something about Serena I hadn't fully understood before, that all that careful control I'd once mistaken for coldness had been built, brick by brick, out of love. Out of a 16-year-old deciding no one else in her family would have to be afraid if she could help it. It didn't excuse the way she'd shut me out during the worst of the rumor mess, but it explained it in a way that made it impossible to stay angry about for long. Serena started spending more nights at my apartment after that. Not because trains were missed, not because storms trapped her, but because she wanted to be there. And slowly I made space for that. An extra toothbrush. A drawer she didn't have to ask permission to use. A hook by the door for her coat that hung there so often it stopped feeling temporary. Her ridiculous cat socks, which she'd kept from that very first night, and which turned out to be, against all odds, her favorite pair. The bakery downstairs got to know her order. Cinnamon roll on weekdays, an almond croissant if it was raining, which in Boston is a fairly reliable bet. And the woman who ran the counter started setting one aside without being asked the moment she saw Serena's coat on the stairs. My plants, which Serena had once eyed with open suspicion, multiplied under her attention until my windowsill looked more like a small, deliberate garden than the chaotic accident it had been before. She learned to leave her shoes by the door instead of lined up with the geometric precision she brought to everything else, mostly because I asked her to, and mostly because, I think, some part of her liked having one space in the world where nothing needed to be perfect to be safe. I learned, in turn, to let her see the parts of me I used to hide out of habit. The anxious spiral before a big presentation, the nights I needed reassurance instead of pretending I was fine, the small, unglamorous fear that still lived somewhere under my ribs from my last relationship, the one that had taught me needing things made me too much. "You're not too much," Serena told me one night, months into it, both of us tangled together on my narrow couch under one blanket, rain soft against the window in a storm that neither of us minded anymore. "You never were. I think whoever told you that just didn't know how to hold someone who felt things all the way through. I happen to like that about you. It took me 32 years to learn how to feel anything all the way through, and you do it like it's nothing." "It's not nothing. It's terrifying." "I know," she said, pressing a kiss to my temple. "You do it anyway. That's the part I fell for." There were harder nights too, in fairness, because that's what real love actually looks like once the dramatic parts are over. An argument about whether she was still working too much. A night I got quiet and defensive when she gently pointed out I was doing the thing where I apologized for needing anything. A Tuesday she snapped at me over nothing, and then, later, sat on the edge of the bed and said, quietly, that her mother's old fear of never having enough still crept up on her sometimes, and she was sorry it had landed on me. We were still learning each other. I don't think either of us minded that. It felt like the kind of work that was worth doing. The ending, if there is one, though it never really felt like an ending, more like a beginning that kept being true, happened on a rainy night almost a year after the first missed train. We were working late again, the office half lit and quiet the way it gets after 9, another campaign crisis mostly solved, and I looked up at the clock and said, half joking, "You're going to miss your train again." Serena checked the time, unhurried, and then closed her laptop with a decisiveness that had nothing to do with panic. "I know," she said. "I'm letting it go on purpose this time." "On purpose?" "I like having somewhere else to go now," she said, and there was something so simply happy in the way she said it that I felt it land somewhere deep and warm in my chest. I don't mind missing the 10:40 when I know exactly where I'll end up instead. We walked home together through soft rain, the city glowing wet and gold under the streetlights, her hand finding mine somewhere around the second block and staying there the rest of the way. She still had her work bag over one shoulder, still wore the same kind of sharp, precise coat she'd worn that very first night, and I thought, watching her laugh at something small I'd said, about how far we'd both come from two women who used to sit across a conference table, pretending not to notice each other. The bakery downstairs was still baking for the next morning when we climbed the stairs, that warm, yeasty smell drifting up through the floorboards the way it always did, familiar now in a way it hadn't been that very first night. Her coat went on the hook by the door, next to mine, the way it had for months. 2 mugs sat on the counter from that morning, the chipped blue one with the bird on it, the plain white one that had somehow become hers without either of us ever discussing it. Her cat socks were folded, absurdly, in the top drawer of my dresser, corners matched, the way she folded everything, the way she probably always would. Serena stood in my kitchen doorway, hair damp from the rain, and looked at me with an expression that was nothing at all like the composed, unreadable woman from those first creative reviews. She looked, simply, like she was home. "Can I stay with you?" she asked softly, and I understood, the way I hadn't fully understood the first time, that she wasn't really asking about a couch anymore. She hadn't been asking about a couch for a long time. "You already have," I said. "You already do." She crossed the kitchen and kissed me, unhurried, certain, rain still tapping soft against the windows, and warm bread rising somewhere below us in the dark. Outside, another train pulled out of the station without either of us, gone before it mattered, the way trains had stopped mattering to us a long time ago. I thought, standing there in the place that had somehow become ours, that some people wait their whole lives to be asked that question by someone who actually means it. I got to be asked, and to answer, more than once, and every single time the answer was the same.